So I planted a orange tree in my backyard. It's been a number of years ago. It's a basic navel orange tree, nothing fancy. I just want to go outside in the morning and pick an orange off the tree. Not a grandiose goal of mine, but it is simply a goal to have a fruit-bearing tree with oranges in my backyard. So I watched how to plant it on a YouTube video, and you know what? That YouTube thing is pretty amazing. You can learn just about anything in the world, how to fix something or do something. Just go to YouTube and put it in. It's an amazing little thing. I just discovered it. So I did exactly what I was supposed to do with that orange tree. And you know how much I like to follow directions and color between the lines. I babied this tree. It has been well tended to, watered but not overwatered. I fertilized it with the top of the line citrus fertilizer. The recommended fertilizer I've been using has 6 parts of nitrogen, 6 parts of phosphorus, and 6 parts of potassium. Maybe that explains certain things. Think about it. Why would fruit ever be produced with fertilizers with the number 666? So our reading is a short parable. It's about a fig tree. About a fig tree that also has been using fertilizer with number 666 because it's not producing either. Let me remind you about parables. The word parable is a compound word, comes from para, which means to come alongside or compare, and balo, which means to throw or see with. So parables are used in giving instructional lessons or principles with holy meanings. And the great scholar C.H. Dodd wrote, as it is simplest, a parable is a metaphor or simile drawn from nature or common life, arresting the hearer by its vividness or strangeness and leaving the mind in sufficient doubt about its precise application to tease the mind into active thought. To tease the mind into active thought. Now, it's important for you to know that the fig tree in the parable has not produced for around 6 years, not 3 as it's stated. Because if you were a Jew of that day, you would have known that for the first 3 years, it was forbidden to eat fruit from a newly planted tree. And we know this because of the great book of Leviticus. Chapter 19, verse 23. When you come into the land and plant all kinds of trees for food, you shall regard their fruit as forbidden 3 years. It shall not be eaten. So this poor fig tree has produced zilch, 0, diddly squat, nada, zippo, nothing in all of those years. I couldn't think of any more words. It was hopelessly barren, kind of like my pitiful orange tree. Now, interesting, the fig tree, it's done nothing bad. It's done nothing wrong. It's not a sinful fig tree. You know, it's not coveting anything or lusting after the lemon tree. It's not envious or jealous, or there's no drunkenness, wantonness, no gambling in this fig tree. It's just taking up space in the orchard and not producing. It's not doing anything wrong. It's just not producing. Now, I also discovered something interesting about fig trees. The fig tree takes up a large amount of nourishment, which deprives the surrounding vines of their needed substance. Fig trees don't need a lot of tending to, they don't need a lot of caring, but they do need a lot of nutrients. So rightfully, the grower's expectation is that a fig tree is to produce figs. And if it doesn't produce figs, it doesn't really have much value to the grower. The first point I want to make is that the grower expects the fig tree to produce figs. Everyone good with the first point? I like to eat now. A fig tree is expected to produce figs, an orange tree is expected to produce oranges, an orchid is expected to produce beautiful flowers, and a Christian is expected to produce. So is the point transferable? As Christians, are we expected to live like Christ? Does God have that expectation of us? So can I say, without you all getting upset, well, I'm going to anyway, that each one of us is made to produce. God has uniquely gifted each and every one of us and expects us to bear fruit. I heard someone once say, professing without producing is of little to no value. So as followers, we do not lay dormant like that barren fig tree or my hopeless orange tree, but rather there are expectations of us. We are to bear fruit. And as a Christian, the question is personal. So how are you doing at bearing fruit? And that's the kind of question that teases us into active thinking. How are you doing with living out your faith? Now, I know that everyone in this room wants to bear fruit. There is no doubt. Nobody wants to be a barren fig tree or a hopeless orange tree. I know that. I know that we don't come here week after week after week just to simply take up space in a comfortable church pew. Nobody here has a goal of being a mediocre Christian. We follow Christ because we want to make a difference in the lives of others. We follow Christ because we want our lives to be productive and successful for the right reasons and in all the right ways. Sharing the good news of God's love in Christ is deeper than a worthy venture. It is who we are. It's the fruit that we bear. So I will suggest that what we are striving for is to live like Christ, Christ-like living. We strive to produce the characteristics which best embody Christ. The Apostle Paul describes them as the fruit of the Spirit. And Peter urges the development of other actions in our faith that we might be fruitful. And so that list includes things like love and self-control, along with joy and peace and patience. It includes kindness and gentleness, generosity, faithfulness. It includes knowledge and endurance and piety and affection. I believe that Christ-like living equates to being fruitful. And we bear fruit by living Christ-like lives. This past Thursday in our Lenten devotion, the words from D.T. Niles spoke to me, and this is what he said. The chief difficulty is that God demands of us that we live by faith in God, by God's sovereignty over the future, and by God's sufficiency for the present, while on the other hand, the various other gods whom we can serve appeal to us in terms of things we can see and the forces we can calculate. The choice between the life of faith and the life of sight is the choice between a God whom only faith can apprehend and the gods whom one has only to see to understand. The more we live Christ-like lives, the more productive we become. That's our second point. First point, Christians are expected to be fruitful. Second point, we are fruitful when we live Christ-like lives. So now we turn to the question, what do we need? What do we need to be more productive? How can how can I live a Christ-like life? And I ask with a sense of importance rather than a rhetorical question, and I ask it with a certain sense of urgency. So I want to go back to the list, and I'm going to read it again, and this time I want you to listen. I want you to listen intently to the list, the characteristics that Christ embodies. And I want you to listen for one of those characteristics, something that you noticed, you heard, something that grabbed a hold of you, one of those characteristics you're really good at, or one of those characteristics you're not any good at. Love, self-control, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and goodness, knowledge, endurance, piety, affection. See, I have the expectation that something on that list will speak to you today. One of those characteristics that will show you how you can live more like Christ. So I invite you to make a note of that in your head and then challenge you to take it to heart. Because the truth is we need to produce more. The world needs us to produce more. We need to activate our interest and elevate our commitment to living more Christ-like lives. And if our lives don't produce self-control or love, if we don't bear the fruit of joy and peace and patience, if there's no kindness or generosity or faithfulness or gentleness or goodness or endurance or piety or affection, how will the neighbor or the server at your favorite restaurant or the stranger or the enemy ever know that their lives can be different? How can this community and world be transformed if we do not embody who Christ is? How will anyone know that they too can have the life that we have? The kind of life that's abundant and eternal. There is some urgency for each one of us to be more fruitful. So I've been thinking about my dad a lot lately and how difficult it was to care for him during his long battle with Alzheimer's. And if you're a caregiver, if you're giving care to someone right now, you know the difficulty, you know the effort and the energy it takes to care. Caring for another demands so much patience. And I can honestly say, during that journey with my father, there were times that I was not patient to him. But to be like Christ for him, I had to make a conscious effort to bear the fruit of patience. I've been thinking about that couple deciding whether they're going to stay together after a number of years in a relationship. They've stopped talking to each other and only complain about each other. They found themselves in a very fragile place, but they have realized that to be like Christ for each other, they have to choose to bear the fruit of self-control. I have been wondering about my friend in high school whose daughter continues to choose a destructive path. Addiction has consumed the energy and resources of that entire family, costing them more than they could ever afford. But to be like Christ for her, they have chosen to bear the fruit of endurance. To be like Christ for each other, they have chosen to bear the fruit of affection. And I've been in conversation with a young man whose life has been severely damaged by physical and sexual abuse as he experienced it as a child. And to be like Christ for his perpetrator, he has chosen to bear the fruit of self-control. It matters. I've been stewing about my sibling whose self-centeredness and uncompromising demands have tattered our relationship. But to be like Christ for her, I have to make the choice to bear the fruit of peace. It matters to be like Christ to each other, for each other. It matters to be like Christ for ourselves. I'm not inviting you to make such a drastic change that the rotation of the universe changes. I just simply would invite you to take a small step toward the more excellent way of living, a small directional veer toward the embodiment of Christ-like life. To be like Christ to another. So, what situation is going on right now in your life where you can choose to be like Christ for that other person? What can you produce? Some kindness? A little gentleness, some affection. What I know to be true is that each of us can live faithful and fruitful lives. We can do that for each other, and each of us has the capacity to make the choice to live lives that bear fruit. And friends, I believe that's worth our effort. In fact, let me say, I think it's worth our best effort. Thanks be to God. Amen.